How would people assess China's economy in 2024? My answer is simple. It's in a bad state. The economy is worsening with further decline, rising unemployment, and falling incomes. The issues from 2023 have not improved this year. In fact, they are only gotten worse. Many people might wonder, what will China's economy look like next year? Will it continue to decline, or will there be a recovery? The Chinese Communist Party has rolled out several stimulus measures recently, with more expected in the coming year. Could these policies turn the economy around? Hi, I'm Dongshan. Welcome to Dig Into China, where we explore China in depth to uncover unique insights. In this episode, I'll begin by reflecting on China's economy in 2024, followed by a look ahead at economic trends for 2025. The poor state of China's economy in 2024 can be attributed to a range of factors, including a declined birth rate, a shrinking workforce, and the collapse of land financing due to falling housing prices, among others. A recurring theme in 2024 is overcapacity, which had sparked the debates about electric vehicles and clean energy sectors, as well as concerns over deflation linked to overcapacity. Overcapacity is certainly the main issue in 2024. In my opinion, it will also play a crucial role in determining the direction of China's economy in 2025, as this problem is likely to worsen next year. Therefore, any analysis of China's economic outlook for 2025 must center around the issue of overcapacity. So, how did the overcapacity issue emerge? It's a result of Xi Jinping's efforts to revive China's growth engine. After 2015, as labor costs in China increased, the country's previous growth model, which relied on cheap labor, became unsustainable. China needed to find a new engine for growth. In Xi Jinping's view, that engine was to heavily support high-tech industries, particularly by boosting exports of high-tech products to ensure continued economic growth. This policy is reflected in the supply-side reforms and the Made in China 2025 initiative. Supply-side reform focuses on phasing out outdated industries and nurturing high-tech sectors, upgrading the manufacturing base. Meanwhile, Made in China 2025 aims to establish China as a leader in advanced manufacturing by 2025, supported by targeted industrial policies. Naturally, there is nothing wrong with developing advanced manufacturing. China cannot remain in low-end manufacturing forever. If it spends its future solely producing clothing for others, what prospects would it have? For China to achieve prosperity, it must shift towards high-tech production such as cars and chips. The critical question is, how can China produce cars and chips effectively? Xi Jinping's strategy focuses on using government intervention to channel funds into these industries to spur their growth, rather than allowing market forces to naturally guide their development. Xi Jinping's approach embodies a planned economy mindset. While it isn't as rigid or detailed as the traditional planned economy, I refer to it as a new planned economy model. This approach has inevitably created issues, with government intervention resulting in overcapacity and significantly inadequate consumer demand. In a recent interview with the Financial Times, Natixa's chief economist Alicia Garcia Orrero highlighted the severe imbalance in China's economic model. China makes up 15% of global consumption, yet it accounts for 18% of global GDP and an astonishing 30% of global manufacturing output. I believe Garcia Orrero's statement is problematic. The consumption she refers to is final consumption, which includes both government and corporate spending. If we focus solely on household consumption, the situation looks even less favorable. Based on data from the first half of 2024, China's household consumption for the year is estimated to be around $5.48 trillion. Meanwhile, World Bank data shows that global household consumption totals roughly $60 trillion annually. This means China's share of global household consumption is just 9.1%, less than 10%. With only 9.1% of global household consumption, 18% of global GDP, and 30% of global manufacturing output, these figures clearly highlight a significant imbalance. This imbalance has directly manifested in China as deflationary pressures in 2024 and 2023. The overcapacity in manufacturing combined with insufficient household consumption essentially creates a situation where supply exceeds demand. When supply outstrips demand, prices are bound to fall. These deflationary pressures are a direct result of Xi Jinping's new planned economy and represents its early domestic impact. However, starting in 2024, the influence of Xi's economic model begins to spread globally, leading to what is referred to as the China shock. What does China resemble today? If we imagine the world as a village where each person represents a country, with everyone both buying and selling goods, China stands out by primarily selling and rarely buying. China produces an excess of goods and continuously dumps them on the market at low prices. In this setup, trade between China and other countries doesn't constitute a win-win scenario. It's not even a zero-sum game where one side gains while the other loses. Instead, China's current trade model can be described as a negative-sum game where both parties end up losing. A clear example of this is China's electric vehicle industry. Domestic electric vehicles subsidized heavily by the government are a distorted product of this model. Despite strong sales, the industry lacks economic profitability, with many Chinese electric vehicle companies struggling with losses and facing the threat of bankruptcy. While China's electric vehicles aren't turning a profit, they have made survival more challenging for European automakers and left some US car manufacturers barely hanging on. Despite their lack of profitability, Chinese vehicles maintain strong cost effectiveness. This dynamic has effectively turned China's electric vehicle market into a negative-sum game. China's aggressive underpricing in the electric vehicle market has created a scenario where both Chinese and foreign automakers are struggling. This naturally prompts retaliation from other countries. After all, without responding, they are left only with two unfavorable options: subsidize production like China or face inevitable decline. These countermeasures extend far beyond the EU, the US, or even the electric vehicle industry itself. Many nations and sectors are taking steps to push back. For instance, Russia recently introduced a 55% tariff on Chinese auto parts. Even countries with traditionally friendly ties to China like Brazil have begun imposing tariffs on Chinese steel. This wave of protective measures is now unfolding across industries on a global scale. The Chinese Communist Party frequently claims that Western imperialists are bending on destroying us, which leads many to assume that sanctions against China are primarily driven by geopolitical or ideological conflicts. This narrative suggests that Western countries sanction China solely to suppress its rise. However, this perspective oversimplifies the situation. Sanctions from leaders like Trump, Biden, Putin, or institutions like the EU are seldom rooted in geopolitical or ideological motivations. Even Russia, which maintains relatively closer ties to China, imposes sanctions, albeit to a lesser extent. At its core, these sanctions are driven by trade dynamics. As long as Xi Jinping's new planned economy continues to flood the global markets with cheap products, such countermeasures are inevitable. This isn't about political rivalry. It's about the economic disruptions caused by China's policies. The issue of overcapacity caused by Xi Jinping's new planned economy should have faced global resistance much earlier, but the pandemic temporarily masked the problem. During the pandemic, widespread lockdowns and production halts left many countries unable to meet domestic demand. China stepped in with aggressive exports, and these nations needing supplies had little reason to object. However, as the pandemic subsided and global production resumed in 2023, overcapacity began to draw attention. By early 2024, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had publicly called out the issue, bringing it into sharper focus internationally. In the second half of 2024, countries started responding with tariffs and trade barriers, shifting the debate from criticism to direct action. This escalation signals a turning point, and by 2025, overcapacity is likely to become a central challenge for China's economy. Looking ahead to 2025, a decisive response to the China shock is inevitable, especially with Trump having won the election and set to return to the presidency. With Trump back in office, it's highly probable that the U.S. will not only raise tariffs on Chinese goods, but also spearhead a global wave of trade retaliation. Many nations could seize this opportunity, riding the momentum of Trump's trade policies to introduce their own sanctions, resulting in coordinated effort to counter China's economic practices. In 2024 and 2023, the main focus was on how overcapacity affected China's domestic economy, particularly the deflationary pressures. However, by 2025, as the global response to China's economic impact intensifies, the focus will shift to the external effects of overcapacity. We must pay close attention to how tariffs and other trade barriers introduced in reaction to the China shock will impact China's economy in 2025. So, what will China's economic trajectory be in 2025? The key issue is how the Chinese government will handle the upcoming global containment. There are two possible approaches. One is to embrace internal transformation, and the other is to firmly resist and confront it directly. Let's first discuss the idea of self-transformation. This approach calls for China to shift from an economic model that stimulates production and exports to one that prioritizes increasing household consumption and boosting domestic demand. The goal is to reduce excess production through enhanced internal consumption. However, this shift requires a crucial measure, improving the purchasing power of consumers. When I refer to improving consumer purchasing power, I mean focusing on creating a consumption-driven economy, rather than relying on measures like issuing shopping vouchers or offering appliances subsidies. These methods still ultimately serve to stimulate production, such as through appliance trade-in programs, which mostly benefit the manufacturers. The real way to stimulate consumer spending is to redirect government subsidies from sectors like clean energy and car manufacturers to healthcare and pension systems. Additionally, reducing taxes for residents will increase their disposable income, encouraging them to spend. By enhancing welfare benefits, people will feel more confident in their ability to spend, while lower taxes will provide them with the financial freedom to do so. This approach is the true way to boost consumption. In the future, a shift from prioritizing production expansion to focusing on expanding consumption, boosting domestic demand to address overproduction, could offer a viable solution. This approach seems realistic, especially considering that China's household consumption is currently $5.48 trillion, which makes up only 9.1% of global consumption. If China can increase its consumption share to 18% of GDP, matching its GDP proportion, it would generate over $5 trillion in consumption. This would be more than cover China's current trade surplus, which is about $1 trillion annually. Alternatively, China could choose to stand its ground. Xi Jinping is unlikely to abandon his new planned economy model, continuing to prioritize export-driven growth and production as the main strategies to address overcapacity. If this path is followed, China may implement the following measures in 2025 to cope with the global pushback. First, China might respond with retaliatory tariffs. If other countries impose tariffs on Chinese goods, China could take a direct stand by imposing its own punitive tariffs in return. Moreover, China could also restrict the export of certain products and limit imports from those countries, using these actions as leverage to discourage further tariff measures. The second approach would be to devalue the yuan, which is a strong method to counteract tariffs. If a country imposes a 10% tariff, China could counter by devaluing the yuan by 10%, essentially neutralizing the tariff's effect. This would help maintain the competitiveness of Chinese exports, allowing China to continue offloading its excess production through exports. A third strategy would be to ramp up subsidies. If a country imposes a 10,000 yuan tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, China could offset this by providing a 10,000 yuan subsidy on each exported vehicle, thereby mitigating the effect of the tariffs. In response to the global blockade expected in 2025, it is highly likely that the Chinese government will adopt a hard-line approach and maintain Xi Jinping's new planned economy model. In September, China introduced a large-scale stimulus policy, which led to a surge in the stock market on October 1st. While this was seen as a policy shift, it does not signify a fundamental change in China's economic model. The country is still following Xi Jinping's new planned economy. The shift mainly reflects a change in Xi's understanding of the current state of this economic model. Prior to the September meeting, Xi Jinping did not recognize that his new planned economy model had caused problems in China's economy. However, after the meeting, Xi acknowledged the existing challenges. Yet his solution remained centered on reinforcing his new planned economy model rather than abandoning it. At least for now, Xi Jinping has no intention of changing his new planned economy model. Recent statements from the central government show a firm stance against the growing trade barriers, especially regarding tariffs. For instance, in response to the latest U.S. sanctions, Xi has imposed restrictions on rare earth exports. This time, the restrictions are even more severe, as they include prohibitions on the transshipment of Chinese rare earth to third countries for re-export to the U.S. Any entities attempting this will face penalties from China. While global sanctions of this nature have been a common tool for the U.S., it marks China's first such action. Additionally, a recent remark by former central bank governor Yi Gang has drawn attention. Yi Gang stated that from an economic standpoint, the best course of action would be not to retaliate against tariffs and trade barriers. This led some to interpret it as a sign that the Chinese government might not take a tough stance and could surrender to the global pressure. However, Yi Gang quickly added that from a political perspective, not retaliating is not feasible. Regardless of the perspective, China is expected to adopt a confrontational stance in 2025, with Xi Jinping resolutely defending his new planned economy model. Many in China, especially stock market investors, continue to fantasize that a single economic policy from the government could reverse the country's economic downturn. Can policies truly turn around China's economic trajectory? It's possible, but the key doesn't lie in rolling out more stimulus plans. The real solution requires abandoning the new planned economy approach and shifting from a production-driven model to one centered on stimulating domestic consumption. Even if Xi Jinping abandons his new planned economy model to focus on stimulating domestic consumption, whether this would lead to economic improvement remains uncertain. The key lies in how he implements the transition and what measures he adopts to encourage consumption. However, if Xi continues to adhere to his new planned economy model, China's economy is unlikely to recover in 2025. Any additional stimulus policies under this framework will not resolve the economic issues, but will likely worsen them. The economic challenges China faces in 2025 are set to surpass those of 2024. In 2024, exports provided a temporary lifeline for addressing China's overcapacity issues. By dumping excess products onto foreign markets, China managed to partially alleviate the strain of overproduction and ease some of the deflationary pressures. However, with global containment measures expected in 2025, coupled with Xi Jinping's anticipated hardline response and continued reluctance to prioritize domestic consumption, the imbalance between production and demand within China is bound to worsen, further exacerbating the deflationary crisis. These effects, however, won't be immediate. Implementing tariffs and other trade barriers takes time. The economic chill is likely to become more apparent by April or May of next year. Thank you so much for watching. If you find this video helpful, please like it, drop a comment below, and hit the subscribe button right here. It really helps YouTube suggest my video to others. I'll be back with more content soon. Until then, be well.